Welcome to Dark Age Radio presents Dark Iron, a world of Iron Kingdoms, world of Western Amoran, world of War Machine, and would have been known as World of Hordes as well, but it's all War Machine now. Podcast, yeah, it's World of Iron Kingdom. So I'm one of your regular hosts, Chris, and I'm joined for this episode by a guest host, Randy Newnham. Hi, Randy, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about the Iron Kingdoms. It's my favorite setting. It's something I've played in for 20 years, and yeah, I like it.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's scary when we get to say it's 20 years because it has been that long. It has been that long, or a bit more since Witchfire trilogy and War Machine. I think War Machine came out in 2003. Yeah,
I think it was 2003. Yeah.
yeah. God. Anyway, yeah. So for this episode, we're going to be talking about Corvis, the city of ghosts. Corvis is quite a good flashpoint in the War Machine setting, and for Iron Kingdoms is an excellent kind of melting pot of cultures, concepts, and character types. So we're going to look at that. And before we get into that, Randy, you can kind of give an introduction to yourself and like how you've got involved in Iron Kingdoms in general, and I guess we could also talk about kind of some of the cool things which are coming out soon for Iron Kingdoms and for War Machine.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm Randy, and as far as a player of Iron Kingdoms, my journey started in 2002 when I picked up a really neat monster book I saw on the shelf, the Monsternomicon. I picked it up, and I love the approach to it. I love the way it was narrated, like with Professor Pendrake, and it really inspired me to bring those things into the campaigns I was running, and that only escalated when with further releases like the character primer, which kind of like whet the appetite, and then like when we got the character guide and the world guide, that that started a journey that I took my gaming group on, and that was yeah. And over the years, I've played the different editions. The 2D6 version, which was based on the war game, which was exciting and different, and I'm excited to see it in fifth edition. Yeah, fifth edition D&D I think offers a lot. It's has a different feel that it took a little bit of time to reconcile to but overall I like it. I think it offers a lot, and I think it really opens it up to a wider player base.
Yeah, well, I
But
mean,
yeah, and as far as as I go, sorry about you wanted me to
mhm,
introduce myself. So that's my Iron Kingdoms, and yeah, I've been a gamer for over 30 years. Like when I
mhm.
started with a D&D Red Box in 1989, and I've um, yeah, just played various games, mostly D&D and its offshoots, but there's other stuff. And as far as like miniatures games, I've dabbled in War Machine a little. I could field like several like armies of I could field armies of most factions
Mhm.
from the war game, despite like not really being much of a player, yeah, of
Yeah.
it. So, um, but yeah, and right now I live in Eugene, Oregon, in the U.S., and I just and I do work in PR. That's what I do.
And obviously, you write along with B, you write for the Iron Kingdoms RPG.
Right.
So has that been just since the most recent edition, or did you write anything before then?
I've written fan content for a while, but it's only been in the recent edition
Yeah.
that I've been like having stuff that goes into official sources. So, I think that how that happened was on I believe it was on Reddit that
Mhm.
Gat saw me like busting out some content. Someone was saying something along the lines of what would a Sea King look like in fifth edition in Iron Kingdom's Requiem. I was like, all right, well let's figure that out. Here's my thoughts, and statted it out, and it was like, and a couple other things like that, um, like um, like a first draft of the Statixus race, and I think that he liked my approach to things, and he said, "Hey, would you like to write something in the next set of books?" And so my first content showed up in the Borderlands Survival Guide, supporting the Borderlands and Beyond um,
Yeah.
Kickstarter. So
Yeah, because that's where I kind of started as well. Because Matt just basically saw me streaming the previous edition of Iron Kingdom, so it's like there's someone that actually gets this setting and loves it. So cool. And then, do you do any other writing since then for any other RPGs?
for other RPGs, no. I, a little bit of my writing appears in my wife's role playing game, Storm Hollow, from I guess it's like 10 years back now. But uh, other than that, no real published work. So
It's yeah, I mean it's well, it's one of those. It's a double-edged sword though, isn't it? It's like you want to write more, but then that takes time up, and it's like where do you want to put your time? Um, yeah, that's definitely a problem I have because I like writing for different settings, and then it's kind of like okay, it's then I get two contracts at once, and you kind of like oh shit. Um,
yeah.
Cool. Okay. And then before we get deeper into like talking about Corvis and stuff, what are your particular favorite bits of the Iron Kingdom setting? Like particular faction, particular feature?
What I guess what drew me in before was like the kind of the grittiness of the setting. That it was specifically lacking the high polished heroic veneer of like the of more traditional settings,
Mhm.
and that aesthetic really appealed to me, and also the fact that magic didn't solve everything, and that it put more of a burden on like getting out there and doing it. So that yeah, so the tone and the aesthetics like really drew me in, and I think that it's that Iron Kingdoms has maintained that
Mm.
over its over its different releases. I mean, it's with fifth edition, it's a struggle because a little bit because it has like the basic assumption of like everything available all the time, like
Yeah.
but still, I think that that what has been put out for Iron Kingdom's Requiem has really stayed true to that flavor.
Yeah, that's always my advice when looking at Iron Kingdoms is kind of like for the games master is like, yeah, I know players might go, but there's this D&D book. It's like just forget it because it's like it, it's gonna cause more problems than it's maybe worth. And if you want to play Iron Kingdoms as the Iron Kingdom setting, they're generally better ignored. Um, Whereas if you're going to play your hodgepodge D&D, then sure, if you want someone to go, I'm going to play a Warcaster from Iron Kingdoms, then sure, do what you want with your setting that's got everything and everything all at once. But yeah, it's that's always a problem with D&D. I'm very much a start with the whole thing and then narrow it down to go. That's the experience you want to deliver, and like cut away as much of the fat to give yourself a good experience. Cool. Okay. Right. Well, then we're going to move into the main segment, which is about the City of Ghosts, Corvis. Right. Okay. So Corvis, I will do a very quick overview of where Corvis is, because just to give you an idea of people listening who haven't read all the books or kind of are still kind of new to the setting. So Corvis is essentially at the northern east corner of the region of Signar, and it sits on where the Black River splits into the Dragon's Tongue and which heads off to Five Fingers, and then the rest of the river heads south to Caspia. And north of it is this entire deep forest, huge forest area called the Thornwood, which is a discussion point in its own right because there's ruins of an ancient kingdom in there, which ties in with Everblight and stuff, and the background behind the Mulgar tribes that we understand of Trollkin and Ogren and so forth. There's also swamps and Widower's Woods, which kind of features as part of the more recent history of the setting. And then if you go more east, you get past the swamps, you go into the Badlands, and essentially where there's little townships and so forth, and then you're into the areas which at one point, more recently, were basically where there was a lot of scorn setting up encampments to raid and so forth. So Corvis is a very rainy city. It's on marshy ground. It's constantly sinking into its foundations are constantly sinking. It's being built upon time and time again, which gives it a certain feel. We'll talk more about the look of it because I have feelings of what it looks like, and Randy, you might have your own opinions of how it looks. To the northwest is Fort Riker, which again features into the more recent history. So there's kind of like this old dilapidated fortress. There's also Orvan's Lost Mine, which is somewhere to the northeast, and then obviously if you continue further north past Thornwoods, you get to Cador. If you go northeast, you're heading up the river. You basically head up to Lale, and beyond that to Rule. And then if you go west down the river, you're going to basically be on the border between Signar and Ord. And eventually down that river, you get to Five Fingers, which is another huge topic for another day, because Five Fingers is amazing and another great flashpoint kind of place. And then, of course, to the south, you've got the rest of Signar, and there's some mountainous areas nearby, and essentially, you've got Corvis, which is well fortified. That's split into 3 large segments with lots of bridges, with a few bridges between them, and it's this a perfect kind of storm of everyone going to, because it sits between all of these kingdoms and all of these types of regions where you can get lots of different kind of resources. So it is a very interesting city.
Yeah, that's what I like about Corvus is that it's on the edge of everything.
Yeah.
So like if any sort of like region or anything, it gives you such a large selection of things to go for, and if you are if you don't have your campaign planned out, if the idea is to kind of follow the players and see what they want to do, it's a really a perfect starting point for that, because it's close to it all.
Yeah, exactly. So when I envision it, my kind of view of it is I think of elements of Venice with the whole Baroqueness and some of the classic artwork in Witchfire Trilogy.
Mhm.
The bridges look incredibly Baroque, and the bridges themselves are like built upon with there are buildings on these bridges. They're so huge and wide to span these rivers. And
Yeah.
then I add on top of that, I think of kind of like Edinburgh with kind of like the gothicness and the height, because you get these very narrow alleyways in Edinburgh, and yet
Mhm.
they would have almost like 20 stories tall. So you would get stone foundations and buildings that go up for about 5 stories, and then the rest is just these horrifically, they're just precariously built wooden, buildings on top of that, which is then is all this weight that is constantly sinking down. So that, and then it's lashed with rain or mist, or I'm sure in the height of its summer, it's also this really, really awful. It'd be an awful place to live during the summer. It would stink to high heaven. There'd be
Yeah.
mosquitoes and yeah, just not great. And then you've got to combine on top of all of that, all the industry, which is going to combine with the weather to make for kind of the very Victorian London kind of smog. And that's how
Yeah.
I kind of, those are all kind of the things I think of. I don't know what other kind of reference points you'd throw in.
Yeah, so I certainly see all that. I mean, definitely the smog, definitely like the odd layering of buildings, and I wasn't aware of Edinburgh, and like, but yeah, I definitely see that as being a thing as things just sink down. That the it necessitates building up. Also, I live in the Pacific Northwest, so we kind of have that type of weather,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's kind of easy to kind of feel out. Here in Eugene, Oregon, it's a very similar to Seattle. I think that people are gonna have a better idea of that, where there's a lot of rain. It's damp all the time. It We do have a winter, but it doesn't get terribly cold in the winter. Um, and it just like stays wet all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And summers here, they do they do get hot and humid, and we certainly we certainly have a lot of mosquitoes. But yeah, we have the yeah, certainly. The mix of architecture is certainly going to be a thing. I really like the what we saw in the Witchfire trilogy, as far as like the carved marble, and considering that we have that and the stonework, and that go back to the Orgoth here,
Yeah.
who founded the city, and then what people, like just working class people, are building on top of that, and also what they're able to salvage of the past underneath. So
Yeah, and that's a good point as you bring up. It's like, so Corvis was founded by the Orgoth, which is an important point to know. So that's we don't have a that's not been I don't think that's been definitively said where in the timeline of the Orgoth occupation, but it's
mhm,
basically somewhere between 600 um, before rebellion to 200 years before the rebellion. So it's somewhere in that
yeah,
time frame. And that also ties in with the fact that there's a part of the Witchfire trilogy. There's a tomb, which was an Orgoth kind of emplacement, which got converted into a tomb to keep Alexia's the Witchfire. Oh, not the Witchfire coven, but the
mhm,
Cyanor's coven of witches there. Their bodies. I mean, and then yeah, we'll quickly say about the history. So yeah, that's Corvus was around that time, and then with the defeat of the Orgoth, the kingdoms, the peoples. Let's say peoples, because this is always interesting about Iron Kingdoms. Is that while we think of the Iron Kingdoms of Ord, Lael, Kador, and Signar,
mhm,
within those kingdoms are many different peoples because there's Umbrians and there's I can't think of the list off the top of my head. There's a lot of people. So
yeah,
to me, that's always a really important feature. You don't just go, oh, they're just Signaran. It's like no one's just Signaran. They're
right,
Tagorans or they're Cadorans from a particular people who actually live in Signar and don't align themselves with the Cadoran Empire, and that's very I find is much more reflective of the real world and
yeah.
rather than kind of some really tropey fantasy settings out there. But yes, the Corvis Treaty is what laid the foundation of the modern kingdoms, and I guess where the borders are. And then more recently, in 593, we have the Coven of Witches executed, and their bodies were buried in the old Orgoth fortress out in Widowers Woods. Who obviously that entire thing, along with their execution at the hands of the Witchfire Blade, starts the Witchfire trilogy essentially, and that gives rise to Alexia's invasion. We'll say invasion by an army of undead from Fort Riker. Her defeat, we'll say defeat at the time of that, and then after that, the subsequent invasion by Vinter Railthorn and the former kind of king lord of Signar, and he's at the head of an army of Scorn, who are like this new race group. And who are repelled in thanks to Alexia Ciano leading an army of undead against Vinter, with again using the Witchfire. And then there's a whole list of events after that, which I can't remember off the top of my head. That there's more, because obviously Signar has been Corvis has been a location for further battles nearby. What with Cador coming in and taking the Thornwood and other attacks. I think, have there been subsequent attacks by the Scorn? I want to think there is.
On Corvus, I don't recall any any subsequent attacks by Scorn on Corvus itself.
No, the main threat has always been Cador to the north, I think, and that battle line in the Thornwood, which is terrible. So yeah, I mean, what things can we find then in Corvis? What are your favorite? Like, what can you tell us about the city then? If you want to take that, Randy.
Yeah, so I think that, with it being like at the edge of everything, that there is a lot going on with like competing nationalities of people, and so I mean, yeah, so I mean, even like you said, even beyond Cador, Signar, Lael, we have the nationalities of like Midlanders, Mord, Skirov, Umbrians, and then doing their things. We also have, it's also a city next to swamps, so you have like a city folk versus the swampies, a type of that that they're going to regard these people as as all backwoods and such, and like connected with the um, with the dark magic of the past, that of the kingdom of Mord, that like that ties into Everblight's influence on them. So there's and there's going to be like the physical leftovers of all of this. I mean, this is you have, you have this basically this fortified city, that was built by the Orgoth. You're going to have like a lot of their architecture and horrors and undead remnants of that people there, and their victims. You also have the Trollkin and their groups there. Um, yeah, I
It's interesting to say, like, with the Orgoth, because I think that's a good point to like start with, like saying like what particular features or buildings there are or districts of the city, because we have, even though there's the three kind of segments of the city, we could say we've got also a few islands that sit in this confluence of rivers, and I guess the main island we can talk about is where there is there's the jail, I think, is in the Let me open up my map. I always get this wrong. Corvis map. He's going to Google right now. Corvis map. Iron Kingdoms. There we go. That's what I wanted. Yeah. So we've got sitting. Yeah, good if it was annotated. The annotated one. That's what I want. Oh no! Why does it do that to me? Yeah. Let's open that up.
I think that I have a link I can send you.
I've got it here now.
Okay, good. There we go.
Right. So we've got so there is so you've got City Hall sits. I think that says City Hall. But yeah, sits on a island of its own right. So that's where obviously that's going to be. I'm sure while it's been modernised, there will be within the foundations of it, where it's being built over, are going to be remnants of the Orgoth buildings there. In particular, I'm sure the jail and courthouse, I can imagine, has been built upon again to make it larger as the settlement has obviously grown over time. But I'm sure certain areas of that old Orgoth architecture are still appear. So you can imagine there's these large, gurning demonic faces which have been weathered over the centuries. And unlike the rest of the jail, I guess are built from almost like such large kind of cyclopean kind of like sizes of rock that have been hewn into shape, rather than being built in a more kind of typical sense as people would build. And I think that's already kind of like gives you an idea that there's also going to be other buildings around that still have those kind of shadows of them. So that's in like the out connected via a number of bridges to the eastern segment of the city, and that's where basically most of the rich people live. There's a park. There's going to be these, I wouldn't say beautiful townhouses, because again, it's like Venice where everything has to make use of height. So they're going to be very large, baroque, opulent apartment blocks, essentially. I guess in that sense, you've got also an element maybe about kind of Parisian architecture, because that's also quite tall to allow people as much density of people to live. And then we've got other cool places. I mean, the one we have to say you've touched on is we've also got the Corvis University, which is going to be in the northern quadrant, which is the northern quadrant is more of the industry. I say quadrant, it's not quadrant, we've got 3 segments, but it's the northern quarter essentially of it. And Corvis University, again, I can imagine is built upon a large kind of Orgoth structure, but has been supplemented with buildings to house the lecturers, the laboratories, the museum. I imagine there's such a crazy museum that Victor Pendrake has created of creatures, plus other research collected God knows what. And plus
that makes total sense. You know, with it being the site of the signing of the Corvis treaties, that in addition to the natural history that we're getting from like Pendrake and others, that there probably at least is like some repository, if not like an actual museum for artifacts related to that.
Yeah, there must also be like such a really there surely must be a very strained relationship between the university and the cathedral of Morrow that is also in the same region of the city, because there are going to be books and items of history relating undoubtedly with the Orgoth in the university, which members of the Order of Illumination, who surely have headquarters within the cathedral, must feel like those should be either kept under lock and key in some sort of like chained library, like you get in Hereford Cathedral, where that was like the nearest cathedral to me when I lived where I grew up. Just like books all chained together, so you can't just like disappear off with it. But you can imagine that kind of like that strained relationship of it belongs in a museum, but it's like, yeah, but if someone read that, it could open up, all manner of horrors.
Yeah, I mean, so that I mean, I think that that's one of the interesting and complex things about Corvus is that there is all the history and artifacts. The kingdom of Signar is primarily Morrowan, and had had become more like a higher percentage Morrowan, like after the events of the the early events of the War Machine books, with Striker's Purge and such. Um, that um, that it has to be interesting as far as tension between the Morrowans and the um, and those who come there, seeking that sort of like forbidden knowledge, and also the kind of the sinister, the slight or the perceived to be sinister swampy folks who kind of like bear the um, bear the stigma of the legacy of the kingdom of Mord that came before them,
Mhm.
and and also just yeah, probably a lot of Thamarites come here seeking out that knowledge, or artifacts that they can utilize. So
Yeah, so you've got Corvis University. Sorry, I've got my numbers. It's in so there's and the map because it's not used. Not this is the older map. I think I should be looking at the one that's out. There's a really good. This is a good point actually. Say in the is it the GM's toolkit for the new edition. There's a really excellent map of Corvis.
there is, yeah.
So we've got the university. That's actually near the park. The park is in the same segment as well. Most of the rich people live, which is near the city hall. There's lots of bridges there, so that's very. I can just imagine like it being like Venice, like lots of interconnecting bridges going through buildings. You can imagine to get around a lot easier. There's surely got to be lots of kind of uh, like gondoliers essentially, or ferrymen kind of
Yeah.
operating, and also to get across the river to the other side. And the river is going to be is monumentally wide. I guess we're talking about like the width of like the Danube kind of job going on here, where you can barely
Mhm.
see the other side. So really, to get
I
to the
think
other side
U.S.
of the river,
people might utilize the Mississippi River
yeah.
as like a point there, like for people listening on this side of the pond.
So you definitely need like a steam barge or steam powered vessel to happily get you across the river, rather than having to do the, I sure is arduous and heavily taxed thing of going from bridge to bridge across the main bridges between quarters, because of course those bridges are going to have so much traffic. Someone surely is taxing that and asking for a fee. um, we've also we've said that it's the Morrowan Cathedral, and that's obviously a very important site for part of the Witchfire trilogy, because there's
Hmm.
a tomb there where Alexia's mother was interred with the Witchfire blade, and is that's where it's recovered from, and her uncle, the prelate Father Dumas, is there. And as I said, I can imagine there's like quarters for like monks or nunnery or equivalent, and then there's also going to be quarters and resources for the Order of Illumination or
Hmm.
other kind of militant religious orders. So that's a very good kind of. And what the reason for these details is because these are like places where, for your adventuring companies, these are places to kind of anchor your group to go, if they're operating out of Corvis, where would they potentially go in their initial formation to get a lot of stuff for free for doing certain day-to-day tasks. Like you can imagine, operate a group of witch hunters would operate out of the Morrowan Cathedral. or have to obviously go there to research about a particular dangerous entity that has once more reared its ugly head. But if you're a caravaner, or because we were talking about Borderlands Beyond, if you're a caravaner, and that's another kind of adventuring company or similar, you would mostly be operating out of the other quarter of the city, which is where a lot of the merchant borgs are located. So essentially, parts of the city kind of do congregate certain industries together by I guess nature of like it's easier for like as goods are brought into the city that they offload to all the traders in the one place, and that's where you get them from. It's also mostly easier for like the merchant guilds to kind of manage those if they're all in the same group of buildings that they rent out for a nice healthy profit. And then there's a big quad which is near one of the gates out of the city where it's a huge it's literally a huge open air market. And that I think that gives a good flavour of it. Obviously, there's the banks of the river have many docks and warehouses, and as we said, there's going to be so these areas are not you're going to have industry scattered through the city anyway, but certain areas congregate. Like there's also an industrial borg, and again, that's likely because it's easy to offload all the coal in one area or whatever other minerals are brought in. And so that area would be the buildings would be pitch black. Like you would never they could be pristine marble years ago or and become black within a matter of days or weeks. So yeah, I think that gives kind of a sense of the structure of the build of the city. There's other features like there is a Menite temple, but this would not be kind of like again, this is like the Menite of kind of like the old Menite faith rather than the
Sulamanites.
yeah. And obviously, there's an order of the Fraternal Order of Wizardry Lodge. There's also a guild too for engineers, and then of course, on top of all of this, there is crime galore in this city. Obviously, and then there's the Undercity. Are there any other bits you want to point out there as we kind of, I guess, wrap up this kind of like quick overview of the structure of the city and what it's like?
I mean, well, I guess as far as the top side, not really. I mean, it does it. I mean, I guess it does with the bridges and with the separation. I mean, it does offer like interesting options as far as like localization and like the the fact that just getting to other places like in the same city can sometimes be like a little bit more complicated since you have these choke points so that if you're if you're at the university and something a citywide problem is happening and you need to get to city hall like what that means it's like you can look on the map you can see it's just like a few hundred yards away presumably, but the thing is that you're going to have to cross at least one bridge or go across the water. It offers interesting considerations for like a role playing scenario.
Yeah, you can use that. I guess what you're getting is like you can turn what looks like on the surface a trivial trip into you can make that quite a lot of narrative to go, well, they're passing through this market. What could happen in the market as a random encounter? Or if they're going across one of the major bridges or even a smaller one, is that a place where certain gangs operate maybe? And if you essentially if you want to bulk out your adventure for your story for your players, you can drop in these what I don't want to say. I think you could say. I hate using the word random encounter in the classic D&D sense.
Yeah,
It makes it seem like you've just thrown it in to act as a bump in the road to because you think your players are doing too well, or
yeah.
just or to help them grind up the XP levels. I think the reason for these encounters by using the nature of the city is to enhance the feeling that the city itself has character and is
Yeah.
not just and you're not just going between way markers to do the basics. I think you can build upon that a lot. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you say things like urban fantasy, it conjures up a like it has a connotation that is very different. But the but having the city like have its own character and like being a character and like or even like it's like different regions like being kind of their own characters with their own with their own needs and their own ways of going about things, and that I think that that opens up like opportunities for like a deeper role playing. And
and
yeah.
it's I find that a good way of like you can then seed plots for subsequent stories because you go, oh, they went, in their little journey through the city to get to, say, if they were going from the cathedral to the university for whatever reason, and going past a certain merchant or witnessing a certain gang of miscreants, and then those are reoccurring characters or then characters that are the feature of the net of a subsequent story, it then makes it feel more alive. Um,
Hmm.
I think this fits into the fact that again, I think this fits in the fact that the way you use Corvis is not, and the way you play Iron Kingdoms is you're not is necessarily not in the way you would normally approach traditional fantasy RPGs and dungeon crawling because you're going between scenes and trying to create this feeling of an organic setting, and you're not just going, I've done this room, I've killed the monsters, I'm going to have a quick rest to replenish my spells and carry on to the next thing. It's like, no, you guys have a deadline to get from this place to this place because you're investigating something, and it reinforces the danger of getting caught up in subplots and or maybe you made the wrong decision, the bad decision, because again, should you have maybe paid a little bit more to get on the steam powered barge to get across the river, or did you decide you're cheap and you're going to walk it? Like that cost of choice, which I think some players are hesitant to make choices. They're always out for a zero sum game where they get to do something and it doesn't have a cost. Um, yeah, there's a lot there to explore, and I think you can explore even just like a single segment of the city. That could be almost a feature, like that could just be all you ever look at for quite a few stories, depending upon the adventuring company that you play as. I think that really
Yeah.
then brings us into kind of what do you play as, and we haven't even talked about the fact there is an undercity. There are these ruins. There are literally streets under the city. There's old caverns carved out by the refugees, as it were, during the Orgoth occupation, and so
Hmm.
there is an undercity and there is an economy. There is a culture that lives there. There are gator people will say, sorry, gator people that exist down there, amongst other things. And obviously, there are ghosts and old graveyards and graveyards that are well since forgotten, and ossuaries. I'm sure there are plenty of ossuaries in that way. It's a bit like Paris with the catacombs. Um,
Yeah.
that's another good touch point. Um, that would actually be a really good reference point. I've just thought of as a computer game is Assassin's Creed. Is it Assassin's Creed Brotherhood? Is set in Paris? That would be a good kind of point. Um, so yeah, what kind of other adventuring companies would kind of immediately pop out? You go, okay, I'm using Corvis as the the nexus point of this kind of stories I want to tell. What adventuring companies do you think would then fit into kind of your vision of a campaign?
Yeah. Well, the last one I ran, it was the adventuring company that they chose was Intrepid Adventurers, and they chose to have like a patronage relationship with Corvis University, and so that was so you doing that like took them to places in and out of the city, and that it I think that that offered like a fair amount of options for that, and I think that for mercenaries, it's if you have a mercenary charter, it's also really good because it really is like in the center of everything, and so if you if you're a group of mercs looking for a contract, um, because it's such a cosmopolitan area and it's connected to so much that you can either march or hop on a ship and be close to most places they'd want to go.
Yeah, I can
Um,
imagine people from as far as like somewhere in the Badlands or in some like very kind of schlocky kind of Western kind of settlement, someone's been sent to go. We need to hire some badasses to kind of take out the bandits that are plaguing us. Go to Corvis because you'll definitely find a well trained militia of some sort. Mercenary warbands here.
yeah.
But equally, I can imagine that, and I've run this as I can imagine around Corvis, there's definitely, and they're not marked on the map. There are certainly going to be many little townships and
Hmm.
villages and hamlets, and that are going to be connected with, and they're going to be trading there. But you can imagine that again, one of these villages is going to be, or townships is going to be perhaps attacked, but being attacked by bandits, or along the road there's going to be highwaymen, or there's been a spate of weird kind of murders going on in that small village, and you are the kind of investigators that because the watch and the judiciary services in Corvus, they don't. There's not enough of them, so they have to rely on these freelance investigators. So you can also play that.
Yeah.
I really like, and I've run that when I did the stream game. I really like that kind of like pseudo kind of Victorian kind of Sherlock Holmes type group, but in amongst them is kind of like the bruiser kind of Trollkin and the arcane mechanic who is always a useful person who comes out with strange contraptions to allow them to investigate a dead body. So that's kind of what I imagine, because also the people in Corvus, again, we're in that I feel very kind of Napoleonic into Victorian period look with Corvus with the people. So there's a bit of
Hmm.
Renaissance flair to it, but as it goes into a more modern era where they're wearing bowler hats, and they will definitely be wearing some sort of waterproof jacket in Corvus. Um,
Yeah.
that's definitely what I would go with. And I mean, the other thing is, you could easily have is, I mean, we said about is like the anything to do with like merchants. Again, they're there and they have to travel back and forth down the river to get whatever resources. That back
Hmm.
and forth up and down a river may seem routine, but it's a huge river, and anything can and will happen along it. Any other things, ideas that jump out that you would go? That's something that about Corvus that just makes me go, that's a brilliant kind of like story concept, or great for players.
Well, because it has like the Signarin garrison there. I mean, if you have like military affiliated characters, it's also like a kind of a good staging point, and because it's and with it being on the the edge of the frontier,
Mm,
if yeah, military campaigns don't often lend to like the individual action, but given its position, I mean, uh, I guess the Signaran military would call them UEs, the unorthodox engagement teams. It's a good place for those to be based, and if they're affiliated with Signar, or if I guess you also have the espionage angle if you
Mm.
are associated with like a different nation like Kador or a like Lely's refugees, and I think that's worth
Oh
noting
yeah.
in particular because there was I read in the character or the IK World Guide that at that time, which is set in like 604, I believe, there was like considered to be around 100,000 Lely's refugees like in the area, largely in the city. Um, and it just being bursting at the seams with those folks. And you have to assume that with if there's these Lely's refugees like fleeing this like war with Kador in the north, there's probably Kadoran spies like looking for folks there,
Oh yeah.
which gives a lot of options. And yeah, so
I mean, that's a really good point because with the history, it gives you different time periods to kind of set your story. So you could be looking at that the invasion of Lael, and the you would have Lael's nobility or mercenary, that what would have made up their army, those kind of high profile figures,
mhm.
and they would have to look for employment to maintain some sort of lifestyle in the
Mhm.
city. Yeah, and then likewise, if you want to go down that route, playing Cadoran spies would be really, really interesting. Wow, that'd be a heck of a story to play. But then as you go forward in time, because that's like 604, and what's the current time in?
617 is I
Yeah,
believe
wow.
the
So
uh, yeah.
you've got like you've got kind of the quite changed because obviously there's going to be less Lelys there because they've been able to return to their homelands.
Mhm.
Um, there's going to be remnant, but you've now got maybe the remnants near, who are trying to exist within the city of Ios and the Ios and elves, and
Mhm.
uh, their mercenary war bands that are trying to find some sort of existence since those events that happened to their kingdom. That's something we can look at a future date.
Yeah. I would also think that, with the claiming, I mean, with so many people like, fleeing to Hingehold and elsewhere, that there's probably going to be like so many displaced people that that have either stayed where they ended up because it's convenient or whatnot, or that have like formed different relationships with others who are like fellow like refugees. And um, so I think that that's interesting. And like as far as like these like townships all around, that probably some of these are completely just ghost towns. I
Yeah.
mean, because I mean, if with infernals like coming into Corvus, and my understanding was that a gate was open in the Undercity,
Mm,
um, that you there are probably like just big swaths of like places where there was just no assistance, and that entire groups of people were claimed, and then that that left like say real estate. So now you have like one of these little hamlets that like say a group of Lely's refugees like just said, there's this infrastructure here, we can take advantage of that.
mm.
I mean, so I think that's with the entirety of the setting having experienced this, that it might be like a little bit more mixing pot, and that probably contributed to that like 5 years of relative peace between the claiming and the current iteration of the setting.
Mm. And another thing that I just realised when you were talking about the to do with the military and the espionage angle is
Hmm.
that at certain points, if I remember rightly, that Sebastian Nemo centered a lot of his research at Corvus, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I think
So
that I think that the colossal research like took place like near like in a facility like nearby,
yeah,
not necessarily like in Corvus, but like with Corvus being it's like closest
yeah,
center.
it's is it Port Bourne? Is it? Is that the one?
Port
Uh,
Bourne, yeah, is the city that's like
right on the
on the north shore of the river there
yeah.
that was invaded by Crixians.
Yeah, but I can
Yeah.
imagine like that's another angle of the military games and what espionage games, of
Hmm.
course, to deal with technology being stolen from the university or from particular manufacturers who are affiliated with the military. So you've got that
Yeah.
whole angle, which is a great way of mixing military and spy type character concepts with more arcane mechanics or I hate using the word wizards in Iron Kingdoms because I don't
Yeah.
feel like wizard just doesn't make sense. They're arcanists
Yeah.
because that's the other thing is like we to reinforce that I think Corvus is the place where you're going to see very definitely how magic is channeled into Mechanica to make everyday more everyday contraptions rather than the thing of like in D&D where wizards just do kind of trivial cantrips all the time of like clicking their
Yeah.
fingers and a candle ignites. You don't need to ignite a candle when you've literally got arcane capacitors where you just mix some candles together, shake it, plug it in, and the light source is there. It's turned on.
Yeah.
That's the point. So there's going to be some really interesting because I can't remember. Like, I know there's meant to be a train that goes past train line that goes near Corvus, so I don't quite know where the train station would be, but there
Ye-
must be one near Corvus. I don't think it's in Corvus.
Well, I think that yeah, there's not one in Corvus because they made it clear that the ground is so swampy it couldn't
Yeah,
support
right.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
and though I think it's possible that they went back on that or added some sort of like, assisting technology that it would make sense if there were, say, a train going between there and Baines Market,
yeah,
um, which an important industrial center. It's not directly on the river or lake, and
I, I just thought the other really interesting kind of industry and kind of like for playing merchants and so forth is that with the creation of the first initial kind of like airships
oh yeah,
in the setting, there's surely got to be some merchant guilds that are planning or building very large towers in Corvus to allow the docking of airships, kind of the way that airships were meant to dock or did dock, and with like the Empire State Building.
yeah.
That'd be really great scene for a final like fight is up on a huge tower, the wind whipping around you, the rain lashing down, and your steam jack, pounding the enemy as they're trying to make off with whatever dangerous piece of technology on their dirigible. That'd be really wicked. That's
That would be great. I really like the idea of that. With the airships and their I would imagine since like more like hot air balloons were like used and known. I mean that's what Vinter Railthorn
yeah.
escaped Blackshore Island in. You know, that probably like those are probably starting to show up because we have the higher tech ones used by the military with the like the levitation technology,
Mm,
one of which crashed just north of Corvis, like in the Acts of War novels, set in like 611, 612.
Mhm.
And so yeah, that certainly seems like a fun thing to bring in there is more dirigibles that are kind of more passenger transport. And
Yeah.
yeah, and
Um,
yeah.
then I think the other thing to say is that also there's for adversaries, I think it's to kind of like help people kind of a jumping point for stories as well. Because I think it's quite clear there is scope for quite a few different adventuring companies. There's scope to include characters of different heritages, like playing a trollkin, playing an Iron elf, playing a character from any of the Iron Kingdoms is more than easy enough to do. Or if you want to go the other way and play characters who are obviously aligned with Cricks, they are going to be spies and nefarious groups going into Corvis to steal various kind of books of magic or technologies that can then be converted into their necrotech manifestations. Or with the recent death, getting mining the ore, the necrotite. But there
The
are
next,
other horrible factions that also kind of do haunt the Undercity and the city around, because
mhm.
there's obviously there's also another under the underdark kind of dwelling group is the Cephalax. That they will be
Yes.
there, and obviously they're a feature of Undercity, the board game, and so I mean, what would they be doing that? I mean, they're literally wanting to again steal technology, steal people to convert into their thralls, and essentially, I guess, take over the minds of the leadership of the city to turn it into their own thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that yeah, the Undercity like makes it possible for those factions that are not going to be capable of walking the streets to be able to have a role in there and to be established. So yeah, I mean, I can certainly see Crixians, even like blighted or undead folks, being able to get smuggled into the city, and be able to like eke out or establish some sort of something in the Undercity and do that. And the Cephalics, yeah, the Cephalics are fun and interesting. I've certainly had a couple Cephalix encounters in the Undercity for my players that that yeah, like what ends are they working towards, and like how are the players going to confront that and or like rally others against it if it's like an overwhelming force of them and their drudges. And so I yeah I think that yeah I think that the Undercity like certainly uh, opens up some possibilities there for factions that otherwise don't seem like they would have a place there.
Yeah, and again, like the Undercities, then is a great um, focal point if you want to play more nefarious groups as well. If you just want to play a adventuring company who are thieves and they're trying to build
Hmm.
their reputation, and and I guess then you're getting into. I mean, let's like referencing some other games that gives you kind of the option of like that kind of Blades in the Dark kind of play experience with in Iron Kingdoms by playing thieves who are going into again various merchants and stealing items of importance, or maybe assassinating someone, or again recovering particular items that are lost, or just simple rivalries with other criminal organizations.
Hmm.
That's another great kind of option. But yeah, I think what's clear is that Corvis. I think any city setting in the Iron Kingdoms allows you to kind of explore these, but I think Corvis is in such a position that allows you to explore almost every adventuring company there is
Yeah.
and every people that could make up these companies, and so allows you to really make use of almost every book within the Iron Kingdom's range at this point.
Hmm. For sure. I mean, it really is a great starting point that if you're going to run an Iron Kingdoms campaign and if you don't know what the focus is, it's a great place because it enables so many different like options, types of characters, types of play, and if you do know, like if you have an idea, then you probably have like a representation of that already present in like the various in like the books, the source books, even the novels, the Black River Irregulars
Mm.
novels, like have some great um, some some great background on Corvus because they're primarily uh, uh, located there. So.
I mean, that's a good point to touch on as well, because obviously one of the signature characters of the Black River Regulars is obviously as is Infernalist as well. So again, that's
Yes.
another that would be another antagonist that would still be lurking in the bowels of the city. Uh, and
Yeah.
that opens up other angles, because of course they're they would more than likely be infernalists and cultists that are aligned with I can never remember the name of the faction of demons, but
The
they're
No Crayon Order.
yeah, and of course for them to go into court, that's such a flashpoint, because the reasons for them to go into Corvis would be again locating artifacts and items which would be of importance, but importance also to their rival order of demons, because they're the other
The
order.
Felgoth.
Yeah, the fellow are obviously the orchestrators behind the Orgoth.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and the Legend of the Witchfire uh, adventure that came with that was released along with Requiem. The uh, the main antagonist was actually aligned with those, and it was I mean it was primarily uh, the the action primarily had to do with like with like Omodamos being sucked up into the Witchfire, but it was um, it was a member of the Felgoth Order who was kind of like pushing some buttons there and trying to get a leg up on the Nenocreon Order.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I think we've covered a lot there in this hour and a bit. And yeah, there's lots there. There's, I think, good starting points for people to jump into. Obviously, the Witchfire trilogy you can still get hold of, download, have a look at that.
Hmm.
Given the recent addition of all of the Requiem, Iron King's Requiem material, it would be trivial to retrofit to update Witchfire Trilogy to the current rule system. That'd be
Yeah.
dead easy to do. Everything pretty. I think almost every monster or antagonist is represented. Um, you may just have to do a bit of work on some of the NPCs, but who cares? That's easy enough to do, I think. Similarly, the GM's toolkit, as we said, has a bit more on Iron Kingdoms, has a whole history timeline in there, and I think a
Hmm.
little bit about society with like the calendar system.
It does. It has like the various calendar stuff and
And
the holidays,
yeah,
which is also fun. And yeah, it talks about the gangs there as well, and
yes.
the gangs of Corvus. So.
So that's all good. And then obviously, if you really want to take what we've chatted about and in those books, and you could then essentially take and flesh out even further, is The Legend of the Witchfire, which was the adventure book that came out with the initial Kickstarter. So essentially, you can take what's there and you can expand or do even more of a prelude to by exploring a bit more of Corvis, or doing the follow up to by tapping into these ideas that we've been chatting about. Yeah, so I think that's it. So I think we'll leave it there. So again, thank you, Randy, for you taking time out to chat to me about this. If people do, if you're happy, I mean, have you got stuff on social media that people should follow, or?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. So if you want to find me on social media, my you'll find me as Coffee Swiller. So COFFESWILLER, and you'll find me on Twitter, Instagram, and in the Iron Kingdoms Requiem Discord as that. And certainly just reach out and say hello. And I'm always glad to talk about the Iron Kingdoms, and it was really nice to be invited. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, I'm sure we'll get you back on to chat about another thing, that mostly something that, yeah, we'll figure out what really excites you in the RPG currently. That's stuff that's been produced, and or locations or ideas, and we'll go through that. If people want to get in contact with us, you can obviously find everything on www.darker-days.org. You can email us, darkdaysradio@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram @darkdaysradio, where obviously you can find images of things painted. I will try and get more Iron Kingdom stuff done when I get around to buying some more and not doing other war games. And obviously, on related notes, everything from the Nightmare Empire Kickstarter, I think, is now should be available to buy in stores. I know backers have got their books, so
I've seen it. I've seen it available like on online stores, and I would imagine that shops have it as well.
So that's everything for Nightmare Empire. So that's Crix and character types and concepts there, along with a book of scenarios, and along with a further book, which is stuff to do with the Shard Islands and sea battles and encounters like that, plus further other rules. I think to do with disease, isn't it? There's a lot of disease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's battles and various things. So yeah.
So that's there. Obviously, upcoming stuff that will be coming out on that we're awaiting from Kickstarter, something to do with the most recent one, which is the Deep Wild. So I think backers are getting PDFs soon.
The initial PDFs are out for that right now, or like preview PDFs.
Yeah, that's it.
So they're still going through a little bit of revision and a little bit of feedback from backers, and I'd imagine that it should be pretty soon that we see another version of those.
Yeah, and then obviously for anything else, go to Proto Press's website to find out any more updates on the Wargame stuff, because there are previews of upcoming factions for the Wargame and miniatures, which of course is all important if you go down the route of wanting to have some cool miniatures to also use in the RPG. Right, so I thank Randy again for taking time to be on this episode, and I will speak again on this on Dark Iron when we have another episode delving into another part of the Iron Kingdom. So thank you for listening, and goodbye.